Well, thank you, Joe, for that delightful introduction. And it is such a pleasure to be here. And it's just to celebrate the life of someone who, on a global scale, has influenced the world in terms of fundamental human values. It's a real privilege just to be asked to come to talk to you for those 67 minutes, just to share some reflections on, if you like, my own personal accountability to try to live some of those values in my own practice, and to encourage all of you to do what Mandela Day is really focused on, which is to help each one of us to express our responsibility for living those values as fully as we can. So you can imagine what a delight it is for me to be here, just to actually talk about someone who has actually influenced so many on this planet in terms of those values. But I would just like to thank the organisers, because, you know, without the invite from the South African Higher Education Community Engagement Forum, and that focus on community engagement is absolutely central. And also from Delicia Timms on the DUT group, I would not be here, so I want to thank you very much indeed for the invitation. What I really wanted to focus on was the qualities that I think Nelson Mandela has come to stand for, and in particular that notion which I only came across several years ago in Cape Town, which is written into the South African Constitution in relation to Ubuntu. Now, in certainly the Western academies which I'm used to, that idea that I am because literally we are is unusual. That we don't tend to relate from a sense of community and community engagement. And what I just wanted to do was just to start with a short clip from Nelson Mandela, because we are actually celebrating his 93rd birthday today, and also with Mandela Day, to really highlight the values for which he's become known. So I just want to see, and I'm hoping this will carry to the back of the room. As I say, it's only about 1.5 minutes.
Many people regard you as a personification of Ubuntu. What do you understand Ubuntu to be?
In the old days when we were young, to travel through a country, we would stop at a village and he didn't have to ask for food or for water. Once he stops, the people give him food, entertain him. That is one aspect of Ubuntu, but it will have various aspects. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not enrich themselves. The question, therefore, is, are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to be able to improve? These are the important things in life. And if one can do that, you have done something very important which will be appreciated.
Okay, that just to set the scene in terms of something that you are all now familiar with, because uniquely to South Africa, having had Nelson Mandela as your first president, you can actually celebrate now, on Mandela Day, those fundamental human values. Now, when I opened your newspaper, John got me one of your papers the other day, and this was the Mail and Guardian. Now, it's rather like our newspapers. It's actually full of corruption, arrests, violence. Okay, so I could just turn to any page, apart from page 23. And when you turn to page 23, there is a full-page spread about Mandela Day. And it's actually about the values that he stands for. So you've got almost every page about something that is going wrong with society. And then in the middle, you've got the values that actually South African society wants to live by. Now that is a really powerful reminder, I think, that each one of us can now exert our responsibility for actually living those values. That Nelson Mandela is now worldwide, he's known for actually living those values as fully as we can. But around us, within all of our societies, and certainly in the UK, it is full this week of police corruption, of the Murdoch empire having paid off the police. Rebecca Brooks has just resigned and actually, I believe, been arrested. That was only yesterday, I think. We've got so much at the heart of our society that is actually not living these values as fully as we can. And what I want to do today is to focus on the people that are actually living these values as ordinary individuals. That I want to show you where you can access some of the stories of the lives of people who have actually dedicated themselves to living these values of love and hope, of justice and respect and compassion as fully as they can in their own lives. And it's also to show you where you can access these stories in terms of the internet, because this is now one of our most powerful means of communication. And what I want to focus on is something which is now coming out of, and not for you to read this at the moment, but I just want to show you that you can actually access these particular texts on the internet by going into this webpage called actionresearch.net. Now, if you go into actionresearch.net, on the right-hand side, you'll see that you can just click on the Mandela Day lecture, 18th of July in Durban, and I've actually put together the notes from which I'm speaking today. But more than that, it gives you access to the stories of the individuals that I'm going to highlight. Because I want just to show how individuals, just ordinary individuals like ourselves in different parts of the world, are living the values that can give us that sense of hope for the future of humanity. And it's good to be able to use that kind of language. And it's Mandela, to a large extent, that has legitimated that language within our normal discourse. We can bring into the academy to say, these are scholarly inquiries. How do we live these values that carry hope for the future of humanity within our daily workplace? And we can research this, and we can tell our stories and bring them into the universities and gain accreditation for these, in some cases for the masters, sometimes for the doctorates, and we sometimes do it for non-accredited work. That's what I want to actually focus on. And just by clicking on this side here, you actually can bring up the actual notes that I'll be drawing on today. As I start off with the Mandela Day video, some of the descriptions about how he spent more than 67 years actually fighting for those values in South Africa. And today it is calling on us just to devote those 67 minutes of what we're doing to change the world for the better. And it's to devote those 67 minutes to changing the world for the better in a small gesture of solidarity with humanity. Now, it's that I want to focus on, because each one of us, I believe, is actually trying to tap into and live the values that carry that kind of hope. But knowing that literally around us, and it doesn't matter if you're in South Africa, the UK, or America, or China, that you're faced with sometimes hostile forces that are actually not enabling you to live those values as fully as you can. And the person I want to start with, just to show you what it is that she's doing, is somebody called Margaret Farren. And Margaret Farren is a lecturer at Dublin City University. She chairs the editorial board of the Educational Journal of Living Theories, which is a multimedia journal that will actually publish the stories of people who are trying to live their values as fully as they can, and does it in a proper refereed journal publication. Now, Margaret helped to run what was called the Diverse Conference 2 weeks ago, And I've been asked to go over to give a keynote at this conference. And diverse stands for developing innovative and visual educational resources for students everywhere. So it's about developing those kind of resources. And what I've done in these notes is just to tell you the story of what Margaret did as she was at the lecture on action research. And what she did in this lecture was to show one of her students' work that had been published in the Educational Journal of Living Theories. And this was a very special publication because it was the first time that anybody had actually published their own explanation of how they'd actually supported individuals with mental health issues in relation to a program of support for people with those issues. And it was a very courageous paper. The organisation that it was called Ronan, that Ronan Mulhern actually belonged to, had actually asked if we could make this public. So we hadn't any of the usual ethical issues, that the organisation and the individuals wanted this paper to be made public and show how Ronan had worked to help those people with mental health issues to create their own narratives of how they'd actually faced some of the difficulties and actually, to a large extent, with some of them, had actually overcome them by working in a group, being honest about the issues they faced, and actually were doing this with that sense of community engagement. They worked as a community. Margaret, at this conference, showed the paper, she put it on the web, she put it on the screen, and she was demonstrating her influence in bringing into the public domain the story of someone else. So as an educator, she was enabling one of her master's students, his voice to be heard on a very difficult issue, and sharing that with a whole workshop to demonstrate what this guy Ronan was doing to help the people with the mental health issues. So that sense of making public the knowledge of a master's student and bringing it into the public domain and gaining accreditation for it is what Margaret is doing here. And the session was videotaped, and Margaret actually was so delighted to be able to show what it was that her student had done. Now, the notes that I produced for you, that I do hope you'll access, you can just click here and you'll get the 6 or 7 minute video where Margaret is actually doing it. And you'll feel, I think, the sense of the embodied energy and values that Margaret is expressing just in a normal daily work as she shares those values that carry hope, just as Nelson Mandela has lived those values. I'm saying that each one of us in this room, in our normal workplace, can actually also demonstrate our responsibility for living those values too. And I know that it's 67 minutes today, but one of the key things for improving the world is surely that we don't just do it for 67 minutes and then that's it. That we actually try to work on living these values as fully as we can as guiding principles throughout our lives, and in that way the world becomes a better place to be. Now, so that is Margaret. Now what I've got here, and I just want you to connect in with these names, and as I say, this is not for you to, I haven't put this up for you to read, it's just that sometimes the individuals that are so significant, I think, can actually resonate with us. So where I said here, Margaret Farrell, and you've got Margaret's story that you can actually access. Now the next person I want you to just be aware of is, she's a professor of life at a Chinese university, and she's called Moira Laidlaw. Now, Moira Laidlaw of Ningxia Teachers University in China is also a tutor on our Open University course in the UK. And what Moira did was spend 6 years on VSO, voluntary service overseas, in China. And she was helping in relation to the teaching of English in a Chinese university. So all of her students were Chinese speakers, natural Chinese families, they have that indigenous knowledge, but they wanted to actually learn English. The Chinese government made that new law, this was about 4 years ago, that everyone in China had to learn English as a second language. So Moira went over to the university, and she was so successful over those 6 years in developing this kind of action research that the Premier, Hui Jinbo, actually awarded her with a Friend of China award in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. And the university, Ningxia Teachers University, made her a professor for life at that university. But what she did was to actually show, and she was using videotapes of her own practice with classes that were 2x, 3 times the size of the ones in the UK. Her class size was over 80-odd students. Now that may not be strange for you, but in the UK, as I say, you know, if you're over 30, that is a big class. And Moira was able to show with video the quality of the relationship they established with individual students. And in my notes, I've included a video clip of the end of a lesson where these 80 students are streaming past Moira, and you can see it's her engagement that as they're streaming, she focuses on all of the individuals as they're going past her. And there's a look of recognition in relation to those students. And you can actually feel the connection that Moira establishes, as I hope I've learnt from Moira, just as I'm now turning and actually focusing. And it's that recognition of the other which is so vital in terms of what I think we're doing as we recognise each one of our students as having enormous value in terms of what it is that our lives are about, in that, both that recognition and responsiveness. So I do hope, as I say, with Moira Laidlaw, that you will just access some of those details, and hopefully that short video clip that shows Moira at work. Now, I've selected each of these individuals, and of course there are many hundreds more, but each one of them has actually done something quite uniquely their own that they actually have brought into the public domain. You can access the work of these people, every one of them, in terms of their doctoral theses, some of them masters, but Jacqueline DeLong, for example, this is from Canada. Jacqueline DeLong was the superintendent of schools of a very large board. So she had what was called a systemic responsibility. Now, it's unlike Moira. Moira was in a classroom with her students, and that was what she focused on. Jacqueline looked at what she called a culture of inquiry. So she was responsible to a family of schools, for example. She'd have 16 principals with all of those tens of thousands of students, and that would be her responsibility to help those principals improve the learning of their children. So Jacqueline studied herself and her influence in developing what she called a culture of inquiry. And many of you here will have that kind of responsibility, not just for individuals in your classroom, but for the organisation in which you're working. And this idea, you think of this now, of what is it for you to actually support the development of a culture of inquiry where you're trying to live as fully as you can the values that carry hope for the future of humanity. Now, this is what in the workshops, both before we came here and afterwards, I'll be focusing on to try to show how each one of us can bring those values which we're all trying to live more fully into the world, but not only to do that through our stories, but also to change the knowledge in the universities to actually recognise those values. Now, I hope the significance of this can be just highlighted by something I put in my notes. And I mentioned earlier this morning about two of the most influential researchers in the world today. And it's Arnitha Blore, who is president of the American Education Research Association and the program director for the American Education Research Conference, and that is Carol Tyson. Now, these two women are responsible for getting out what is called a call for papers for the conference next April. And that closes on the 22nd of July, the actual call for papers for this big conference. And I put 2 or 3 proposals in for this conference. And why it excites me is linked to the transformative educational studies project that, as was mentioned earlier, has actually been funded by your National Research Foundation in South Africa. And it is to the tune of £750,000. You know, this is not a small amount of money, especially for a humanities project. Now, for you to have based here at Durban University of Technology that project, which could have global significance, is for me very exciting. And it's exciting because of what these two women have said about the mission of the biggest education research association in the world. You know, at their conferences, they regularly get 10,000 people just at one conference. You know, huge conference. Now, what the two women have said is that we as educational researchers have been very successful in what they're calling the advancement of knowledge about education and developing the sense of a scholarly inquiry related to education. So they're saying wherever we are in the world, we can go and read journals with knowledge about education and that kind of scholarly inquiry. But in the mission of the American Education Research Association, it's not just about advancing knowledge about education and encouraging that scholarly inquiry related to education. It's also to promote the use of research to improve education and serve the public good. And the two women, Anita Ball and Tyson, have said, look, very good at the first, are very weak on the second. If you look at what we've done as communities of education researchers around the world, to actually developing research which explicitly improves practice and serves the public good, you can hardly find it. So if you look now at the transformative educational project, studies project, where the central questions are all focused on individuals asking transformatory questions about practice, it seems to me that what you've got here, and it's lovely to be able to say this on Mandela Day, is one of the most significant projects in the global research community that is focusing on both improving practice and literally serving the public good, which is what Nelson Mandela, and that is why we're here in relation to 67 Minutes, to really focus on what are we doing now with our responsibility to live those values and serve the public good. And that is now going on, not just in Durban University of Technology, but we're going to Sisulu University. What is the third university? Is that the KwaZulu-Natal University? You've got those three with the co-researchers and the lead investigators actually from those three universities. And here in the room, I know we have others from other universities that could work collaboratively. And this is why the community engagement is vital, that you could actually work together and share those questions, develop them together, so that you could actually answer those questions about the transformatory processes that you're in to live those values that serve the public good. Now that is what I'm saying, that in relation to you as individuals, just like Moira, Laidlaw, Jacqueline DeLong, and now on to Professor Jean McNiff are doing. Now, Jean McNiff introduced me to the African context. It was largely, in fact, Jean, in terms of that was Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, and that's really appropriate for today, in Port Elizabeth, that Jean was already been working in the South African context to really focus on issues of social justice. And while she was located at Nelson Mandela University, she also developed a master's program in one of the townships in Cape Town, at Khayelitsha. And in the Khayelitsha township, Jean was rather distressed when she learned that quite a lot of the black teachers were finding it difficult to register on master's programs in relation to studying their own practice. So Jean was also a professor of research at a college called St. Mary's College. She's now at York St. John University. But Jean organised a master's program in the Khayelitsha township, linked in with St. Mary's, and those students have actually accredited, they've actually graduated from St. Mary's with their master's degrees, because Jean was determined that she would actually provide an opportunity for the black teachers in Khayelitsha to study their practice and gain their master's degrees. Now, Jean has been popularising the kind of action research that we've been doing together, also with living theories, over the last 20 to 30 years. And she's been extremely successful in gaining the support and the enthusiasm of many thousands of teachers to undertake this kind of inquiry. And the latest is actually in Dubai. That if you access the website of Jean's that I've put in my notes, you'll see that she's been really successful in getting this action research process going in Dubai, which, believe me, it's not an easy context to work in, especially across genders, because of the differences in the culture. But Jean has actually shown and put them on the web, the narratives of the teachers in Dubai. So I do hope, again, that you will connect with what Jean has done, just to see that we can actually do this kind of work ourselves and actually make it public so we can share it. Because if you just look round this room as I can see you, it's an amazing group of people with the embodied knowledge that you actually have. You've got enormous depth, as I discovered this morning, and breadth of knowledge about education. But a lot of it has yet to be made public. A lot of it has yet to be shared. And you imagine that pooling of the energy of your passions in this room and actually sharing those and actually gaining others to come with you to actually look at and share those values and that energy. What a really marvellous movement that would be for social and public good. And again, Jean has done a tremendous amount to try to work on that. I'll mention now the Joan Walton. Joan actually directs the Centre for the Child and Family at Liverpool Hope University. Now, I want to mention this university in particular because Joan wanted me to come as, we call it, adjunct professor, to work with her in the Centre for the Child and Family. And I agreed to do this because I really respect Joan's values. But more than that, the Faculty of Education has got a statement of purpose. And I've never seen this kind of statement anywhere in the world before. And it says that we are committed to developing knowledge and understanding from the ground of values of love and hope. Now, I've never seen that explicit commitment to grounding the generation of knowledge and understanding, all with values emerging, as I say, from love and hope. And coming from a university, having that made public, and I put you the strategic map where that is made public in the notes, inspires me, because it just gives me that feeling of the organisation, the university is holding me to account for living the values that I'm passionate about. And if you think now of hope being one of the scholarly virtues that you can actually bring into your account, literally supported by your university, that this is what they want, just what a powerful group of people we would be to have that as the centre of our dedicated work. And that is why with Joan Walton, as I say, I'm delighted that I'm actually appointed there and can work with her on developing that and making it public. I want to actually mention something now in a different part of the European community in Europe, and that is from a country, Croatia. And this pedagogue, and in Europe they often use that notion of pedagogue, where it's only recently coming into the language of education in the UK. And it's a really high status job, the notion of being a pedagogue, because it is all about that reflection on your own teaching with the values that underpin it. And Branko Bogner has been very, very influential in creating this journal, which I'll just show you, and I put it in the notes how you can access this from the actionresearch.net. But it's just this journal of living theories. Now, it's only really Branko's influence that has actually created this journal, which actually focuses on the educational values that we hold. And look here. I hope you can see. Can you see this at the back? I'll read it if you can't, because you're a long way back to see this. But it is that we are particularly interested in publishing explanations that connect a flow of life-affirming energy with living values such as love, freedom, justice, compassion, courage, care, and democratic evaluation. Now, if you will just think of making public your embodied knowledge, and I was talking in the workshop earlier about the values that motivate people. What is it that gives meaning and purpose to your lives? And it was these kinds of values, not as words, but as flows of energy which you live. So I hope you can sense that what you're doing by being here today for the Mandela Day lecture is enabling me to evoke the expression of the energy and the love for what I do, because without you here, I would not be expressing it with this kind of passion and the desire I have to actually bring your knowledge into the public domain. Now this is what Branko Bogner has been particularly significant in doing through one of the first multimedia refereed educational journals, and it's, as I said, the Educational Journal of Living Theories. But you look at those values, and each one of you, I'll guarantee, that sense of the flow of life-affirming energy. It's my contention that each one of us actually can feel that energy in our educational relationships. Otherwise, I don't think we do what we do. And not only that life-affirming energy, but rather like you've got this unique sense within the South African context of Ubuntu as a way of being. Now, for you to research that relational way of being would be very significant in the world, because it actually helps a responsibility towards the other to be lived and understood. And it's an amazing quality. And so if you could think of how do you bring that quality of Ubuntu into your accounts, and I suggest you'll need possibly visual resources, video to show you in action, to really get on the inside of what this relational quality actually means. We have one doctorate in the University of Bath from an Afro-Caribbean student of mine, which actually is about bringing Ubuntu as a standard of judgment into the academy. And that was accepted, and the external examiners were just so impressed with the quality of this work that you can actually access it from my website in the Living Theory section. And it's by a man called Eden Charles. But I'm saying that each person here from that South African context could research your own practices through that relational value. And it fits so well with what Nelson Mandela said in that YouTube video, where he was actually talking about the values that distinguish Ubuntu. So this is in relation to what Branko Bogner has actually contributed. As I say, he's a pedagogue in Croatia. He's at a university that I don't think anybody here will have heard of. And it's called the Josef Strasmayer University in Osijek. And I just want you to know that this guy exists as a person like you and I that is actually making his contribution by focusing on those values. That life-affirming energy, values as love, passion for freedom, which I think everybody here will know better than anyone in terms of what went on in South Africa to live that passion of freedom and justice. And also within the Truth and Reconciliation process, which was amazing in terms of a creative process in South Africa that has had to be compassion, courage, care, and democratic evaluation. So I think you're living those values, particularly in South Africa, and you can actually make public your knowledge because you've got first-hand knowledge of these processes and values and bring them into the public domain. You can actually share them so that we can all learn and actually understand better how to live them. And that is Branko Bogner. This guy, now a different part of the world, so moving from the European context of Croatia into this guy, Jikan Adler Collins. Now Jikan works at a Japanese university. He is actually English. He got his doctorate with me, and in his doctorate he actually studied what it meant to bring what he called a curriculum of the healing nurse into a Japanese university. He had to get the Japanese government's approval to do this, but what was distinct about what Jikan did was to bring touch as a healing process in nursing into a context that actually shied away from touch. Now in the UK, there is a real problem because you're not supposed to hug young children in the UK because of the fear of paedophilia. So, a few criminals have actually destroyed the natural human expression of love and affection. Now what Jikan has done is actually demonstrate how within a curriculum in a Japanese university you can bring into a nursing program that sense of the healing power of touch within a safe space. That's what he focused on, to actually assist nurses to see how powerful a caring touch, a compassionate touch can be within the healing process. So again, that is bringing new standards of judgment with love and the compassion, with care, into a curriculum which actually did not accept that sense of the healing power of touch. And that's in a context which was not easy to actually work on, which was in Japan. So that's the GCAM for Korea University, and you'll see in my notes I've given you his website, and in particular the visual narratives, because GCAM, like myself, believes that you will only communicate that energy and the passion through the visual record, through creating a visual narrative. You know, no words that you, I think, could describe, for example, how I'm behaving with you, will actually get close to that energy that I'm feeling as I'm able to speak to you. But the video will allow you to show and say, this is what I'm meaning. This is where he's engaging with that flow of energy and he's speaking passionately about a value of freedom or justice. This is what I mean. And it's the pointing, that this, with the visual, that helps you to communicate your meaning. Now, if I look at a different part of the world, and again, somebody like ourselves, this is somebody who's just got a D degree from Bath University. She'll graduate in December. She's self-identifying. She calls herself an Israeli Jew, and she's called Anat Geller. Now, Anat Geller, I do hope you'll access my website in the Living Theory section, because in 2 weeks I'll have Anat's full D there for you to access freely. Now, what's special about Anat Geller for me? It's nothing special in the sense that you or I are not special in this sense. But what Anat did was to say, look, I'm actually working in an Israeli context which is full of violence. That the Palestinian issue in relation to Israel, you can see how difficult it is to actually teach both Israeli students and Palestinian and Arab students together. And Nat has been in a college where she's been doing that and examining her own practice. If you know the Druze women on the Golan Heights, you will know how different culturally they are from the Israeli Jewish woman, having that history. But Anat has been working in a sustained way in the Druze context to try to help the women develop their educational opportunities and literally live their values as fully as they can. And I know in this room there are many people who are sensitive to the violations that have taken place in relation to indigenous knowledge. The idea that, and I've been through this myself in terms of colonization, that sometimes as academics we can actually deny the validity of the indigenous knowledge base, which actually should be made public and validated. So what Anat has been doing is to demonstrate that she's been able to bring the indigenous knowledge of the Druze women, especially, again, in the art in relation to the Muslim world, because her Islamic students really didn't know very much about Islamic art. And that actually introduced them to Islamic art, and she's demonstrated in relation to their students' accounts of their learning that they've got on the inside of their own culture. So that, I do hope you'll just access Anat's work as a child pedagogic instruction, as she says, an Israeli Jew from Hebrew-speaking culture working in 3 educational frameworks and 3 cultures. Because many people here are actually working within very different cultural contexts. And you can actually, you know, we've talked this morning with quite a number of people of how the English language is actually, to a certain extent, getting in the way of the educational opportunities of some of the students who are actually very bright, but actually not able yet to communicate fully, you know, within the language of the academy. So this is part of the issue now of really making sure that we're not colonizing or denying the cultural heritage and indigenous knowledge of so many groups. So do please, as I say, Anat Geller. Now, in terms of your own professors, now, if you look at what has attracted me to come here, which is actually the Transformative Educational Studies Project. Now, I do hope, Tenwinji, I'm sorry about the pronunciation, you know, because I haven't got the language. I said this morning. Now, is it Tenjui? How do I say? Tenji. That's right. Now, as a professor at Walton University, Tenji has been responsible with both Joan, and Joan is actually now lead investigator, but we've also got Kathleen. Kathleen has got together a proposal which really does excite me enormously. And I've put the URL for the, you know the URL, you just click on it and it comes up on the web, for the whole proposal of the Transformative Educational Studies project. And it really excited me, but when I asked this morning how many people in the workshop, and it was about half the size of this group, had read it, I think it was 5 people that had read it. Okay, so I do urge you to look at what Joan and Tenji and Kathleen have put together as a proposal, because it is so exciting in terms of what it's talking about in relation to your inquiries, that each one of you who are engaged in this project can ask your I question: how do I contribute to transforming something about your practice? So my question, which I worked on, how do I improve my practice? You know, you can imagine why it excites me that you've got a whole transformatory project which has got that kind of question at its heart and enables each one of you to focus on your contribution to a transformatory practice which lives these values that in South Africa, because Nelson Mandela was your first president, he's living those values as fully as he can. But as I say, your newspapers are full of everything other than those values, apart from that paper I showed you this morning, page 23, which is just one page, actually really highlighting the values that I think everybody here would like to live. So that is why I think the 3 women professors, in terms of what you've done, is one of the most significant education research proposals that I've ever read. And it's also large scale. That what you've done is you've offered an opportunity for many people to cooperate and collaborate, and this is why the community engagement is so vital. You've offered the opportunity for people to come into your community and offer their individual inquiries which focus on the values that can help to transform their own practice and society. So that's why I wanted very much to point to the 3 women who have done this and are now working as the second workshop that we've got going this morning and afterwards, and then for tomorrow. But I do hope that everybody in the room will just access, again, my website and these notes, because that proposal is, as I say, it's something educationally everyone here will recognise as having such literally transformatory potential itself. So, to the 3 of you, as I say, I'm just really amazed at that, the significance of that. And I'm taking, if you like, that as something over to America in April, you know, the proposals, just to say, look, are you aware that this is going on? Because it serves that second part of the mission of AERA, which is the use of research to improve practice and serve the public good, which the 2 most powerful, as I say, researchers in the States have said, look, we're really very weak on this. And I'll be able to actually point to this project and say, well, actually, you've got a project here which is actually highlighting the significance of what it is you're weak on. So I do hope, please access that. And then I'd like just to draw attention to somebody, some of you I know already know, but if you look at, and this is why I love where Professor Leslie Woods works, because this is the director of the Action Research Unit at Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, you know, in Queen Elizabeth, Port Elizabeth. Now, Leslie has focused her living theory and action research on the issue of AIDS and HIV. And I know from this morning how seriously affected quite large parts of South Africa and the urban, both mainly the rural populations have been and are being affected by the HIV and the AIDS. Why I'm so impressed with Leslie's work is how she's focused on doing something about this to try to enhance the quality of life of those with HIV and AIDS. And her stories, I put the references to where she's published the accounts of what she herself has done. And it feels to me, again, this is transformatory in terms of those values she has of community engagement. You know, I do think that she's passionate about this. I've seen her myself, and when she talks, that the love and the passion for what she does shines through. So again, I just hope that you will access those accounts from those people, because I just very quickly flick down the notes, because what I've done is I've put all these notes on the web. What I want just to highlight is that many of you are working within universities that do not have the I questions as fundamental to research. And what I've put a whole list of the questions from key researchers that have said, these are the empirical questions you can ask, these are conceptual questions you can ask. Not one of them contains the I or the we. So they've eliminated those I and we questions from the questions that academics can ask. Now, what I'm suggesting is that you can have a profound influence on educational knowledge by focusing on those I and those we questions and saying these are the values we're bringing as scholarly inquiries and scholarly virtues into our universities as the appropriate standards of judgment. You know, if you're not judging us in relation to these values as scholarly virtues, you're missing something fundamental to our society, because it's written into your constitution in relation to Ubuntu. And Ubuntu, as you know, much better than I do, actually embraces those values. Now, what I'd like very much to do is ask you, and it's only a few minutes this, because your voices are really important. And this sense of having 67 minutes in with which just to celebrate some of these values. If you don't hear your own voice and the voice of someone else, really connecting in to what it is that matters to you, I don't think that I would have done this Mandela Day lecture appropriately, because, again, Mandela has given many other people a voice. And he's emphasized the importance of, in a democratic way, bringing other people's voices, the act of responsibility, which is really crucial, into the world. So what I really appreciate, as I say, it's just 5 minutes this, and I'll just indicate when I'd just like you to change round to make sure that you've given each person the equivalent time. And it's just a development from what I was doing this morning. So some people will already, I think, have clearer than others the values that you're in touch with, that really matter to you, that you try to live as fully as you can. So it's really just to share that with one other person, and then I'll hold my hand up and ask you just to switch round. And even though you did this exercise a little this morning, I don't think you can ever do it too many times, because you're all the time getting in touch with what matters and clarifying it. So could you just please, as I say, just turn to a partner and just see if you can actually listen and hear to what are the fundamental values that you're trying to live as fully as you can. And remember, with it being Mandela Day, it gives you, if you like, the permission to really get to grips with what really matters. So if you do that, please.
Oh, no, that's a good start. Give my choice well, very similar, yeah. Particularly important to me now as I've become a grandmother. And seeing a young child with so much potential for the future, wanting them to grow and develop and provide opportunities and bring up opportunities related to hope. I just also want to say so many people in lost because the world was so happy. But adding that you said something and to learn that they can be something in their life, they can change their life, maybe where they go to school that they so it's huge. That about attitude. Somebody who one certain self can be seen as aggressive for another person to actually grow. And that's not very helpful.
Thank you.
offering a challenge, so it's not
Finish your conversations. Then might just come no chance unless I shouts. Can I try to listen? That's okay. In the workshop this morning, I was just saying that it's your conversations which are the most important thing, because I know that when I draw you now into this context, you know, I'm now controlling, as I said this morning, the discourse. Yet what was happening on your tables is what really matters in terms of your values, and having someone else recognize the values you're claiming you hold and could help you to be accountable in relation to those values. That's why the small group discussions are vitally important to transform our practices. Now, what I'm able to do in a small group, which I can't do here, is to actually take seriously the values that you were expressing and actually start to work to do something about them. This is why, in terms of recognizing the importance of your conversations as you are raising your values, talking about them, it's actually getting a small group of people that you believe will help you to be accountable to living those values as fully as you can, and to sustain that group. Because in that way, I do think you'll find you have a transformative influence in the organizations in which you're working. But it comes out of that energy, because I really had to work for some time to gain your attention again. Because, you know, you could feel that this mattered to you. You were talking about things that really mattered. And if you've got someone that would work with you for weeks or over months, or in the case of the people I've worked with, we'd do it over years, to see what we're doing to live our values as fully as we can. This is what I think we can do to fulfill the promise of what Nelson Mandela has actually demonstrated in his life, but we now need to take that up ourselves with our responsibility. In the way that, if you like, I'm coming to a close now of the 67 minutes, but I just want to focus on something that I did when I came over last time. And I was asked to be the guest of honour at a book launch at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And some of you may know B.P. Singh, and the book he wrote, which was called When the Chalk is Down. And this was, for me, so inspirational, that I do just want to say to everybody, I do hope you will get hold of that book. And BBC has got a website where you can actually respond to it. Now, the reason I think it's so appropriate in terms of Mandela Day is it's a story of VP Singh, and he spent 25 years to right a wrong over the withholding of deeds of his parents' house. 25 years of sustained activity to try to overcome this injustice. And his narrative, it's very powerful because he brings in the story of his own life, his own practice as a teacher, a principal union organiser, and all the time it comes back to what he's trying to do for his parents, to right an injustice. And there's a really, really sad part of it where he's successful, but both his mum and dad are actually died. They're just not able to understand that he's actually been successful in actually getting them the deeds of their house. But the story is inspirational. So I just wanted very much to draw your attention to that, because from a South African context, it's just illustrative of the courage of an individual in South Africa, like Mandela, who actually spent these years really campaigning against all the odds to overcome an injustice. And so I do hope you'll actually access that story. And if you like, tell your own, because everybody in this room will have the stories to tell. And I'd like to leave you, if you like, with these 67 minutes. And really, it's just the hope, really, and it's a request that you actually will take the values that you know you're living by, and that you know, as I say, when I came to the paper, and it's just this, as I say, this is just a picture of Nelson Mandela in what, you know, the pose where he's actually with his right, you know, this is my daughter in, what was it? Was it 1994? Now, Nelson Mandela came to London, I think it was Wembley Stadium, and one of our really passionate recollections of our daughter was Nelson Mandela had given a speech, and our daughter was climbing on a seat along with thousands, and there she was, you know, doing this. And it was one of the joys, wasn't it, that feel energy and the pleasure of our daughter in response to Nelson Mandela. And when you think that that page is surrounded by all these other pages where the denial of the values is explicit, okay? But here we have the hope, and it's in this room now, and it's very much to do with you living those values you were talking about within your group, but sustaining the conversations. And what I'd like to do, as I say, the 67 minutes are up, and I very much want to just leave you with that hope, that that energy that you were expressing as you were talking with each other will actually be the sustaining qualities that you recall from this talk, and that you will help each other to really account for yourselves in terms of living those values. And I just want to end by thanking Joan and the other organisers, and Delicia in particular, for actually enabling me to come to share something I'm clearly passionate about, but I know that I will leave with this memory of all of you in this room, and feeling there is tremendous hope because of who you are and what you can do. So many thanks indeed.